So you're finally on vacation. You've endured the layovers, you navigated the nightmare at the rental car counter, you've unpacked your sunscreen, and you finally step out onto that warm sand.
Oh, the best feeling.
Right. The sun is shining, and right there, just flapping in the ocean breeze on this tall white pole, is a bright blue flag with a white circle in the middle.
And you probably don't even think about it.
Exactly. You just assume it's, I don't know, a generic welcome sign, or like, at best, a signal that the water is nice enough for a quick swim.
Yeah, it acts as this incredibly comforting visual cue. Like, the human brain sees that splash of blue fabric and instantly translates it to, safe, clean, ready for relaxation.
Definitely.
It functions as this subconscious shorthand for just a perfect, carefree beach day.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our mission for this deep dive is to decode the intense, highly regulated reality behind that little piece of fabric.
But it is intense.
It really is. We are pulling from a comprehensive Wikipedia article on the Blue Flag Award today, and it turns out that simple aesthetic marker is effectively a Michelin star for environmental management.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Right. Earning one of these flags requires passing this exhaustive, multi-point inspection. It uncovers the totally invisible supply chain of your vacation, from like microscopic bacteria levels in the water all the way up to the human rights of local boat crews.
The comparison to a Michelin star is incredibly apt, actually, because we aren't looking at some casual pat on the back for having, visually pleasing sand.
Yeah.
The Blue Flag is a rigorous trademarked certification. It's managed by this non-governmental organization called the Foundation for Environmental Education, or the FE.
Okay, that VE.
Right. And their international standard has quietly but radically transformed how coastal municipalities operate. It often forces massive municipal spending just to qualify.
See, I always assume these massive global bureaucracies are cooked up in a corporate boardroom somewhere, right? By a bunch of tourism executives looking for a marketing angle.
That would make sense, but no.
The true origin story is wonderfully analog. It didn't start with a boardroom mandate. It literally started with a message in a bottle.
Yeah, the foundation of this entire global standard is rooted deeply in a grassroots awareness project from 1985. It was initiated by a French man named Marcel Clebon.
Okay.
And he launched what he called the Message to the Sea campaign.
The mechanics of this campaign are just brilliant in their simplicity. Students were writing messages, sealing them inside glass bottles, and physically dropping them into the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
And the objective wasn't to, find a pen pal. The goal was to track where these bottles would eventually wash ashore. It was a physical demonstration of how localized human action, and specifically human pollution, spreads across the oceans and invades neighboring coastlines.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it provided a tangible, highly visual demonstration of environmental connectivity.
Right, because you can't just see a chemical spreading.
Exactly. Dropping waste in the water in one town inevitably makes it someone else's problem down the coast. And the current Blue Flag logo actually evolved directly from the graphic design of that Message to the Sea campaign.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they just removed the literal image of the bottle but kept the waves.
That is so cool. It's basically the 1980s equivalent of a viral social media stunt. You create this physical spectacle to force people to look at an invisible problem.
Yeah, it was highly effective.
But what fascinates me is how a localized French pilot program actually survived. Usually, these grassroots stunts generate a few local newspaper headlines and then just totally fade away when the funding dries up.
Right, they just fizzle out.
But in its first year, 11 French coastal municipalities adopted the flag. And at that time, they were mostly just verifying they had basic sewage treatment so people weren't swimming in raw waste.
Which is a pretty low bar, but a necessary one.
Mm.
But the survival and the explosion of the program really came down to perfect geopolitical timing.
Okay, how so?
Well, 1987 was officially designated as the European Year of the Environment.
Oh, I see.
So the European Commission was actively hunting for scalable activities to sponsor across the European community. They needed to show they were taking pollution seriously.
And they saw the flag.
Exactly. The foundation presented this localized blue flag concept, and the commission essentially supercharged it. They co-sponsored the initiative for the next 11 years.
Wow, 11 years of backing. That changes the game entirely. I mean, in 1987 alone, They went from those 11 French municipalities to awarding 244 beaches and 208 marinas across 10 different countries.
Which forces a complete evolution of the standard itself.
Right. You can't just check for raw sewage anymore.
Exactly. Transitioning from a localized awareness stunt into a formalized international standard meant the criteria had to expand. To justify that European Commission backing, the FEE had to develop stringent, measurable metrics for waste management, coastal planning, just comprehensive environmental protection.
And the program just kept outgrowing its own borders. By 2001, the organization actually had to drop the word Europe from its title.
Because it wasn't just European anymore.
Right. The Foundation for Environmental Education in Europe just became the FEE, going completely global. Today, they are operating in 81 countries.
It's massive.
You can find these flags waving in South Africa, Argentina, India, Japan, the United Arab Emirates. It's everywhere.
And operating across 81 vastly different ecosystems requires a highly sophisticated structural design.
I would imagine.
Yeah, the FEE maintains a strict international baseline of mandatory criteria, but they purposefully allow for regional variations.
Like adapting to the local environment.
Precisely. A beach in the Caribbean faces very different ecological pressures than a beach in the North Sea. The overarching rigor remains identical, but the specific application flexes to fit the local environmental reality.
So let's get into that rigor, because this is where the requirements become almost punishing for a local government. What exactly are these municipalities signing up for?
It's a lot.
Right. To get a flag on a beach, a town has to meet at least 30 different criteria spread across 4 massive categories. There's environmental education, water quality, environmental management, and safety and services.
And the water quality metric is typically where municipalities face their first major hurdle.
I bet.
A town cannot simply have a health inspector eyeball the shoreline and declare it clear. The sampling protocols are incredibly rigid. They require continuous, verifiable testing for specific biomarkers.
Yeah, when I first read about the testing in our sources, I assumed they were looking for like industrial chemicals or oil spills, but the primary targets are actually Escherichia coli, which we all know is E. coli, and intestinal enterococci.
Right, those specific bacteria are chosen because they are the most reliable indicators of fecal contamination.
Ugh, gross.
It is. Enterococci in particular are incredibly hardy bacteria. They can survive in saltwater environments where other bacteria might just die off. So finding them in the water doesn't just mean the beach is gross, it's a glaring alarm bell, indicating that the local municipal wastewater infrastructure is actively failing.
Meaning raw sewage is literally looshing into the bathing area.
Exactly.
And the FEE draws a hard line here. The criteria mandate absolute zero influence from industrial or sewage waste, but fixing a leaking municipal sewage system isn't just a quick patch.
No, not at all.
It often requires multi-million-dollar infrastructure overhauls, which means a town has to deeply financially commit to this standard before they ever even see a flag.
And that financial commitment extends aggressively into the environmental management category as well. A local government must establish a dedicated beach oversight committee.
Just for the beach.
Yes, they are required to install and constantly maintain public restrooms, proper waste disposal systems, all to ensure absolutely no dumping occurs.
They also start dictating human behavior, which is fascinating. If you are on a blue flag beach, you are not allowed to camp. You cannot drive a vehicle onto the sand unless it's strictly for emergency or maintenance purposes, and perhaps most contentiously for some tourists, no dogs or pets are allowed on the beach.
Yeah, the pet restriction often generates a lot of pushback. But domestic animals introduce foreign waste into the sand, and they actively disrupt local shorebird populations.
That makes sense.
The FEE is enforcing a hierarchy where the local wildlife ecosystem takes precedence over a visitor's desire to walk their dog.
Speaking of pushback, though, there is one specific environmental management rule I genuinely struggled with when going through our sources.
Good.
A criteria mandate that seaweed and other natural remains must be left on the beach unless it reaches a point where it's deemed, like, dangerous or severely disruptive.
Ah, yes.
My immediate thought was, wait, doesn't everyone want a perfectly raked, pristine white sand beach on vacation? You see these luxury resorts driving heavy tractors over the sand every single morning to groom it so it looks like a Zen garden. Why mandate leaving the seaweed?
It's a great question. And the seaweed mandate is arguably one of the most philosophically important criteria in the entire program.
Really?
Yeah. The FEE is deliberately dismantling our conditioned idea of what a good beach actually is. Tourism advertising has spent decades convincing us that a healthy beach is this sterile, flat, featureless sandbox.
Right, a completely sanitized environment.
But ecologically speaking, a sterile beach is a dead beach. That line of seaweed and natural debris washed up on the shore is scientifically known as the rack line.
The rack line.
Yes, and it is the absolute lifeblood of the coastal ecosystem. It provides the foundational food source for shorebirds. It houses millions of tiny invertebrates.
Wow, okay.
And crucially, as that organic matter breaks down, it injects essential nutrients into the sand that allow dune grasses to grow, which in turn physically stabilizes the beach and prevents coastal erosion.
So by forcing a municipality to leave the seaweed, the blue flag is essentially telling the tourists, you have to share this space. It is a living, breathing habitat, not just a playground designed for your aesthetic comfort.
Exactly.
The seaweed isn't messy debris, it's proof that the coast is actually alive.
The standard constantly balances ecological protection with human needs, which brings us to the safety and services category. Because an environment isn't successfully managed if the humans interacting with it are at physical risk.
Right. They require reasonable safety regulations, which translates to funding actual personnel. A blue flag beach must have lifeguards on duty, or at least readily available life-saving equipment, alongside easily accessible first aid.
They even mandate proactive emergency planning.
Like, for what?
For sudden catastrophic events, like a massive coastal oil spill, the town has to have a plan in place.
Wow. Public health infrastructure is also mandated, like providing accessible, clean drinking water. But the service criterion that most deeply reflects the modern ethos of the program revolves around accessibility.
This is a huge one.
This detail really caught me off guard in the best way possible. At least one blue flag beach in every participating municipality must be fully accessible for the physically disabled. We're talking about engineered wheelchair ramps extending over soft sand, specially designed accessible restrooms, and ensuring that the natural environment is available to everyone, regardless of physical mobility.
And building and maintaining that infrastructure on shifting sands is a major engineering challenge, not to mention a significant municipal expense.
Yeah, that can't be cheap.
But it highlights a core philosophy. True environmental preservation doesn't mean locking nature away in a vacuum. It means facilitating responsible, equitable human access to that nature.
But, pristine beach sand and wheelchair ramps don't mean much if the water washing over the shore is polluted by the massive boats anchored just 100 feet away.
Exactly. The water connects everything.
Right. Protecting the coast eventually forces you to look out into the water itself, and that's how the standard expanded its scope to tackle marinas.
Marinas are essentially complex industrial zones located directly on the most vulnerable edge of an ecosystem.
Yeah, they really are.
Because of the density of machinery and chemicals. The criteria for a marina jump to 38 separate, highly technical requirements.
It literally reads like a hazardous materials handling manual. A marina has to implement strictly identified and segregated containment systems for a terrifying cocktail of substances.
It's quite a list.
We're talking toxic paints, chemical solvents, boat scrapings, batteries, waste oil, and expired emergency flares. And all of this material must be extracted and handled by certified, licensed contractors.
And the rules concerning boating maintenance are incredibly strict. Think about anti-fouling agents.
What are those?
These are specialized, highly toxic paints applied to the bottom of boat hulls to prevent barnacles and algae from growing.
Okay.
Historically, as these paints naturally wore off, they leached heavy metals like copper directly into the marina, devastating the local marine food web.
Oh, that's terrible.
So the FEE mandates rigorous containment protocols. Absolutely no runoff from boat repairing or washing areas can enter the sewage system, the surrounding land, or the water.
They also tackle the reality of human waste on the water. The standard requires dedicated pumping facilities for boat toilets and for bilge water.
The bilge water issue is massive.
For those who aren't familiar, bilge water is that nasty, oily soup of water, fuel, and engine fluids that inevitably collects at the very bottom of a ship's hull.
It's highly toxic.
Yeah. And before these regulations, many boaters would simply pump their bilges and flush their waste directly into the marina waters.
So by enforcing controlled, licensed sewage and bilge disposal, the blue flag treats the marina with the regulatory seriousness of a chemical plant rather than just a casual parking lot for expensive yachts.
But the FEE didn't stop at the docks. In 2016, they realized they had to regulate the boats actually leaving the marinas.
Right, out in the open water.
They extended the award to sustainable boating tourism operators. This covers commercial activities like whale watching, bird watching, cage diving, and crude charter tours.
Regulating nature tourism is critical. The industry often relies on proximity to wildlife to sell tickets, which can be incredibly damaging to the very animals the tourists are paying to see.
We've all seen those distressing viral videos, right? Where like 5 different tour boats are aggressively chasing down a single pod of dolphins just so passengers can get a blurry photo.
It's awful.
The blue flag criteria fundamentally alter how these operators must behave to keep their certification.
The engagement rules are heavily weighted toward animal welfare. Any wildlife must be approached at a deliberately slow speed, granting the animals the time and space to evaluate the situation and choose to leave.
They have to have an out.
Exactly. Tour boats are strictly forbidden from encircling, trapping, or chasing any marine life.
And the acoustic rules are equally intense. When a boat is in the direct vicinity of wildlife, the engine noise must be reduced to an absolute minimum, and the engine should be put into neutral whenever appropriate.
Because the acoustic footprint of a boat is often far more damaging than its physical presence.
I wouldn't have even thought of that.
Oh. Yeah. High decibel engine noise can completely disrupt the echolocation capabilities of marine mammals. It interferes with their ability to hunt, navigate, and communicate with their pods.
Wow.
The standard even accounts for herd dynamics. Special precautions must be taken around breeding animals or calves to ensure mothers aren't separated from their young by an aggressive boat maneuver.
But nestled inside all these regulations about engine decibels and bilge water is an entire section dedicated to social responsibility.
Yes, the social criteria.
To get a blue flag on your tour boat, you have to prove to the FDE that you do not discriminate in your hiring practices based on gender, sexual orientation, disabilities, origin, or religious affiliation.
It's very comprehensive.
Furthermore, operators are mandated to pay fair salaries that align with the income level of their specific country, and they must strictly respect legal working ages.
Seeing labor laws and anti-discrimination policies embedded in an environmental certification often surprises people initially.
It definitely surprised me. It feels like they bolted an HR and ethics department for the ocean right onto an ecological award.
What's fascinating here is when you analyze this through the lens of modern sustainable tourism, it reveals why it's a necessary metric. The FEE operates on the understanding that sustainability is an interconnected web.
How do you mean?
Well, you cannot divorce the ecological health of a bay from the economic and social health of the community living on its shores.
Because a tour operator who is willing to exploit their deckhands to save a few bucks is almost certainly willing to illegally dump their bilge water to save a few more.
Exactly that. Exploitative labor practices are a massive red flag for overall corporate noncompliance. You can't legitimately claim to be protecting a whale sanctuary if you are actively impoverishing the local human population.
That is such a good point.
The FEE is asserting that true sustainability must be holistic. It has to encompass the ecological, the economic, and the social.
So with all these punishingly strict rules in place, the continuous water sampling, the million-dollar accessible ramps, the hazardous waste contracts, and the audited labor practices, how are countries actually measuring up? Like, is anyone actually passing this test?
Oh, the global participation numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
Following the 2024 award cycle, there are currently 5,010 blue flags waving worldwide.
Over 5,000 locations passing that 30-point inspection. That is wild. And the data from our sources reveals an undisputed heavyweight champion in this arena.
Yes, it does.
As of 2024, Spain holds an astonishing 747 total flags.
It's an incredible number.
Breaking that down, they have 638 certified beaches, 102 marinas, and 7 tour boats.
Spain maintains a massive lead over the rest of the world. The other major competitors are Greece with 617 total flags, Turkey with 614, and France, the birthplace of the program, with 503.
And a logistical detail from the sources kind of explains how these numbers roll out. The FEE doesn't just announce all 5,000 flags on the same day.
No, they don't.
Because global tourist seasons are flipped, they announce the awards on a rolling geographic schedule. The Northern Hemisphere, so Europe, Canada, places like that, gets their results on June 5th.
Right.
The Southern Hemisphere, places like the Caribbean, New Zealand, and South Africa get their results on November 1st.
And this timing is highly strategic. It ensures the newly awarded flags hit the press right as tourists in those respective hemispheres are actively booking their summer holidays.
Which brings up a massive practical question for me. Why is Spain dominating this leaderboard so heavily? I mean, having 747 flags isn't just about having a long coastline.
Not at all.
Upgrading the sewage treatment for over 600 municipalities and staffing them with lifeguards and oversight committees requires an astronomical amount of government funding. Why foot that bill?
The motivation is a masterclass in the intersection of environmentalism and economics.
Okay.
Countries like Spain, Greece, and Turkey invest billions into meeting these criteria because the blue flag is perhaps the most lucrative, internationally recognized tourist draw in the world.
It acts as this incredibly powerful, independently verified marketing tool.
Exactly. Families booking international holidays actively filter their searches for blue flag beaches. They want the guarantee of safe swimming water, clean public restrooms, and professional lifeguards.
Of course.
For a nation whose GDP is heavily reliant on coastal tourism, investing the capital to modernize sewage treatment and build accessible infrastructure isn't just a sunk cost. It generates a massive return on investment through sustained tourism revenue.
It completely shatters the old myth that environmental conservation is inherently hostile to economic growth.
It really does.
When an ecological standard is respected and demanded globally, protecting the habitat actually becomes the most profitable business model available.
It initiates a powerful, positive feedback loop. As more tourists become educated and demand sustainable, clean destinations, neighboring municipalities are economically forced to upgrade their own infrastructure just to compete for those tourist dollars.
It's just an incredible evolution. We started this journey looking at a handful of French students dropping glass bottles into the Atlantic to visualize pollution.
Yeah.
And today we are looking at a hyper-complex global regulatory machine that forces municipal governments to test for microscopic bacteria, protect the ecological rackline of seaweed, build wheelchair infrastructure over sand, and audit the human rights practices of tour boats.
It demonstrates how a localized desire for clean water can be engineered into an actionable, measurable standard, one that holds global economies accountable for their coastlines.
So to you listening, the next time you endure the travel stress, you step onto the sand and you see that bright blue flag with the white circle flapping in the wind, you now know the reality. You know the massive logistical, financial, and environmental gauntlet that local government had to run just to get that piece of fabric on the pole.
But before we close, the history of this massive financial investment raises a critical question to mull over.
Okay, what's that?
In our sources, there's a fascinating detail about the initial rollout of the strict criteria back in the late 1980s. When the rules became heavily regulated, several highly famous, traditionally popular beaches completely failed the tests and were denied the flag.
Oh, wow.
Simultaneously, smaller, lesser-known municipalities that had quietly done their environmental homework earned the flag and were suddenly thrust into the international spotlight.
They essentially leapfrogged the famous resort towns just by passing the FEE inspection.
They did. But consider the long-term modern implications of that dynamic, because meeting these Sunny Plus criteria requires immense, sustained municipal funding for water testing facilities, licensed waste contractors, and infrastructure. Does the quest for a blue flag accidentally create a two-tier system for nature?
Oh, I see. You essentially have to be wealthy to be officially certified as natural.
Precisely. Do the lesser-known beaches that manage to secure the funding and the flag inevitably become gentrified, overcrowded, and hyper-commercialized by the resulting influx of tourists?
That's a huge risk.
And on the flip side, what happens to the stunning wild beaches in poorer, underfunded municipalities? If a town simply lacks the tax base to build a specialized wheelchair ramp or hire a dedicated oversight committee, do their perfectly pristine beaches get implicitly labeled as unsafe or dirty and abandoned by the tourism economy? Wow, that completely fractures how you view the entire coastline. The very standard designed to save an ecosystem might simultaneously act as the billboard that gentrifies it while leaving less wealthy communities in the dark.
It's a complicated reality.
It definitely is something to think about the next time you're sitting on the sand, watching that blue flag waving in the breeze.